So not surprised there. And Winston needs to think of a successor at last for him when he does retire. I think hard work is probably the phrase that comes to mind when I think of Shane Jones. I disagree on the high-flying minister a bit. He wasn't. I mean, he was high-flying before he entered Parliament.
What about all those articles in the Listener back then when they just, touting Shane Jones as the next new thing?
I think he's a great orator. I think he's a good. I think he's very good at telling a narrative and bringing people with him. But you got to do the hard work. And remember, Shane Reti got 55% of the vote in Whangarei last time, and Shane in the last 3 elections that he's been involved with hasn't got over 30%. So he needs to knock on the door and learn some of the things that he learned, some of the good things he learned from the Labour Party, which is go door knocking, do some hard work, sell your narrative individually to one individual at a time, and go and hit the streets. So.
Very interesting. Peter there sounding very not quite sure whether Shane Jones will get out there and door knock. And he is going to be up against Shane Reti, another personally talented individual like Shane Jones, studied overseas, also at Harvard, where he was also awarded the Harkness Fellow. 13,000 vote majority.
Yeah.
Won't be easy.
No, I guess it won't be, but I suppose that, New Zealand First and Winston Peters are heartened by what happened in Northland when he stood and sort of completely took by surprise a complacent incumbent. So they probably won't be that complacent this time round, but I guess he thinks anything is possible. I'd just be interested to know what influence Shane himself will have on New Zealand First, which is an interesting political movement, quite reactionary in some ways, and how some of his liberal instincts will sit within that context. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Peter, I can recall he contested the leadership of the Labour Party in a 2013 leadership election, but lost to rival David Cunliffe. I'm not sure if he failed to fire then. Why? Yeah, as you suggest, why now?
Yeah, I mean, look, to be fair to him, I mean, good on him. I mean, he's returning home after 3.5 years as ambassador. He still talks about his own destiny that his elders had sort of forged for him, decades ago. So there's something there that he needs to sort of finish. I think. I just get the sense that he needs to have a lot more structure around him and to ensure that he achieves that destiny. I mean, even today, I mean, he talked about being the navigator and the and so forth. Whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that means for
that's
his
the
people,
problem, isn't it?
Let's put it down to: does it mean how many jobs? Does it mean how many houses? Does it mean how many investors? Let's just put that navigator channel and lens that he's looking through.
Sounded good though.
Sounded really good.
Which waka he is navigating now. There's always that smell of opportunism when people just pick a new party. And why that vehicle?
And what's going to happen to Ron Mark?
Now there's a question to ponder over the weekend, Wallace.
Jim Mora can pick that one up later on. Oh, fantastic, Peter. And Philly McDonald, you've been fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
have you, Wallace.
You too.
From the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, the mother and grandmother of a baby who died after being left in a hot car while they smoked synthetic cannabis have been sent to jail. American billionaire Peter Thiel gets citizenship after 12 days in New Zealand. Those who were here much longer before they became citizens ask why. And we ask, what exactly has Peter Thiel done for New Zealand? New Zealand First finally lets the cat out of the bag. Shane Jones will stand as their candidate in Whangarei. All Blacks captain Kieran Reid backs the Lions, not to win tomorrow, but to return in 2029. Donald Trump's Twitter account goes from bad to worse. And should we pay to park on the streets at the weekends? New Plymouth locals say absolutely not.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. The former Labour Cabinet Minister Shane Jones has confirmed he will stand for New Zealand First in Whangarei. Mr Jones was announced as the party's candidate for the September election at a pub function in Whangarei this afternoon. Lois Williams was there.
New Zealand First leader Winston Peters told the crowd outside Pure Bar that Shane Jones was a farm boy who'd made the most of education to become a Harvard graduate and national leader. He said Whangarei needed someone in Parliament who could hit the ground running and address the electorate's neglected asset base, including its hundreds of one-way bridges and the lack of a rail link to the port. Shane Jones appealed to the crowd to support him if it wanted political change. Another ex-Labour minister, Dover Samuels, said he was there to support Shane Jones and hoped to see him back in Parliament, raising the standard of debate and entertainment. In Whangarei, Lois Williams.
People in emergency housing in Auckland are having to make way for Lions Tour fans. The Ministry of Social Development says it's had to move some people who were staying in motels or hotels as emergency accommodation because of the tour. One provider, Strive Community Trust, has studio apartments and converted office space in South Auckland. Its Chief Executive, Sharon Wilson-Davis, says they're a bit busier than usual because of moving people in during the tour. The ministry wasn't able to give exact figures, but says only a small number of people have had to be moved. Its spokesman on housing, Scott Gallagher, says it's worked with providers to make sure emergency housing demand is met during this time and isn't aware of anyone left with nowhere to stay. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says he doesn't know the extent of the US billionaire Peter Thiel's investment in New Zealand or if he even remains an active investor. Internal Affairs was yesterday forced to reveal Mr Thiel had spent just 12 days in the country before being granted citizenship in 2011. Mr English stands by the decision, describing Mr Thiel as an assiduous investor who's put money into several Kiwi businesses. Asked if he had ever met Mr Thiel, Mr English said he would have to check, but may have met him once as Finance Minister. A judge says the death of an 8-month-old in a hot car while his parents smoked drugs was entirely preventable. Isaiah Neil's grandmother, Donna Parangi, and mother, Lacey Tefetu, were sentenced to 3 years jail today at the Rotorua High Court. Justice Lang adjourned the sentencing of his father, Christopher Neil.
Any death of a very young child is tragic. It is even more tragic when the death is completely needless and is caused by repeated failures by parents and those entrusted with his care.
Justice Lang. In November 2015, Isaiah was left strapped in his car seat in a hot car while adults smoked the drugs and went to sleep. He was found 3 hours later. The Waitangi Tribunal has found the Crown's actions rendered the Horowhenua iwi Mopoko landless. The Tribunal says the Crown purchased the Levin Township site in a way that was significantly unfair to Mopoko, and significant treaty breaches in the 1890s deprived them of their lands. It also says Crown actions contributed to the pollution of Lake Horowhenua and the Hokio stream. It says the Crown took an unusually active role in both waterways and was complicit in their pollution and environmental degradation. The Chief Executive of the Mopoko Tribal Authority, Di Rump, says they've been fighting for recognition for a long time. She welcomes the recommendation to set up a new governance structure for the waterways.
We're going to be talking about those and processing those, but we think it's merely a start in what is an ongoing campaign for us. There's a heck of a lot of work to do.
Di Rump of the Mopoko Tribal Authority. The police in Florida say tennis star Venus Williams caused a car crash earlier this month that led to the death of a passenger in another vehicle. Palm Beach Gardens police say witnesses told investigators Williams ran a red light, causing a crash that injured 78-year-old Jerome Barson, who died 2 weeks later. The report says the car, driven by Mr Barson's wife Linda, crashed into the side of Williams's SUV. Williams was not hurt in the collision. Armed police are helping look for an offender in Parakai, northwest of Auckland. The police say the armed offender squad has been called in as a precaution. It's 5:05. The British and Irish Lions prop Marco Vunipola admits he did grab All Blacks opposite Owen Franks by the scrotum in a scrum, but says it was all innocent. All Blacks coach Steve Hanson's dismissed the incident, saying Franks hadn't even mentioned it after the first test. Vunipola initially said he couldn't remember where he gripped Franks before admitting his family had highlighted it on social media so many times he couldn't help but see it.
I've seen the video back, like you said, family tagged me and stuff like that, but so yeah, they're very supportive, to be fair. No, I was just trying to keep my bind up, obviously, always as a front row, either I bind there or I drop my arm as a penalty to them, so I'd rather grab them than grab nothing, really.
Marco Vunipola. The All Blacks play the Lions in the second and possibly the series deciding test in Wellington tomorrow. The New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko is 5 shots off the lead in the second major of the year after weather forced the abandonment of the PGA Championship in Illinois late in the first round. Ko shot a 1 under par 70 to be tied for 23rd. Taupo rider Patrick Bevan will become the 14th New Zealander to compete in cycling's most acclaimed race when he lines up in the 105th Tour de France in Germany on Sunday. Bevan will line up with 3 other New Zealanders, led by Tour of California winner George Bennett, and says he's looking forward to the challenge.
No 2 races are the same, no 2 tours are the same, no 2 one-day races are the same. Every day is different, so in some regards you just kind of relax and trust that the form is good and the body is good, and you're actually looking forward to being part of the race.
Patrick Bevan, and that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we're on target with Emma Wilson from the Taranaki Darts Open, which for the first time will host a team of Aboriginal Australians. Country life is skinning rabbits in the Bay of Plenty. They'll have to catch them first. We have a mixtape from the drum and bass exponent Tali, aka Natalia Shepherd, and there's a Sonic Tonic dedicated to something you might like to be beside tonight, the fire. Getting cosy on Nights from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from the Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Gisborne and Northern Hawke's Bay, high cloud increasing. Scattered rain tomorrow evening. Remaining North Island areas fine today, apart from areas of fog or the odd shower. Rain spreading from the west tomorrow with possibly heavy falls from Taranaki northwards in the evening. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, rain easing to showers about Fiordland and elsewhere later tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, showers turning to rain this evening with heavy falls for tomorrow afternoon. For Canterbury, rain and showers further east, clearing late tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered rain clearing this evening. Fine apart from areas of fog or low cloud tomorrow morning, then rain or drizzle spreading southwards again from the afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with occasional showers developing. RNZ National, it's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Thomas. Coming up on the program tonight, Peter Thiel took 12 days, others took over 30 years. We compare the paths to citizenship and ask for specific details. What does Peter Thiel offer New Zealand and what has he done so far? Also tonight, Shane Jones is New Zealand first man in Whangarei. Not a surprise, but what does he offer and why? But first, 8-month-old Isaiah Neal died after being left in a hot car for 3 hours while his parents and grandmother smoked synthetic cannabis and went to sleep. Today, his mother, Leisi Te Whetu, and grandmother, Donna Parangi, were jailed for 3 years. But Isaiah's father, Shane Christopher Neal, has been given the option of serving his sentence on home detention if a suitable address can be found. Our court reporter, Edward Gay, filed this story from the High Court in Rotorua.
Isaiah was strapped into his car seat in the back of the family station wagon, while his grandmother Donna Parangi and mother Leisi Te Whetu drove the 40-minute round trip from their home in Ruatoki to Kawerau to buy synthetic cannabis. They got home to Ruatoki in the heat of the day on November the 2nd, 2015. Justice Lang said Parangi told her daughter to leave the sleeping Isaiah in his car seat, and the pair went inside to smoke the newly classified drug.
By sending your daughter to have a rest, you acknowledge that you would take responsibility for Isaiah. When you elected to smoke synthetic cannabis, you must have known that this was going to have a significant detrimental effect on your ability to undertake that act.
And it did. Parangi went to sleep. The temperature outside reached 22 degrees, but inside the car where Isaiah slept, it soared to over 40. Isaiah wasn't checked on for 3 hours until his father, Shane Neal, realised he wasn't in the house and found him in the car.
It was clear that Isaiah was extremely ill at this point. He was limp, unresponsive and hot. Mr Neal brought him back into the address and showed him to Miss Tefetu. She then put him in his cot and took no further action.
The adults then went back to sleep, and it wasn't until at about 6:30 that night they discovered Isaiah was still unresponsive and called emergency services. Isaiah was already dead of hypothermia and dehydration. Justice Lang said it wasn't clear from the expert medical evidence if Isaiah would have survived had his father called 111 after first discovering him in the car.
Any death of a very young child is tragic. It is even more tragic when the death is completely needless and is caused by repeated failures by parents and those entrusted with his care. In the present case, there was no need for Isaiah to have died.
Defence lawyers compared the case to that of a tired health professional who made the fatal mistake of leaving her child in a hot car in Whanganui in 2015. She was discharged without conviction. Justice Lang said the two cases were entirely different, as Parangi and Tefetu knew where Isaiah was. In sentencing Parangi, Justice Lang took into account the 52-year-old's previously clean record and her remorse. Her lawyer Sue Gray said her client was a caring mother and grandmother and would have to live with the consequences for the rest of her life. For Tefetu, her lawyer William Lawson said she went to bed thinking other adults in the house were looking after the children. He said his client had addressed her drug addiction and had returned clean tests in an effort to get her other children out of state care. Justice Lang said drugs had had a huge effect on Tefetu's life.
Your family had in fact become concerned about your ability to care for the children. Your older sister took the older children and cared for them about a month before this offending because she was concerned about your ability to care for the children.
Neal's lawyer, Roger Laybourne, said his client didn't know Isaiah had been in the car until he found his son there. He said for the rest of his life his client will ask himself why he didn't call emergency services earlier. Justice Lang said Neal blamed himself for what happened. He gave both parents time off for their early guilty pleas and remorse. The factor that persuaded the judge to consider home detention was it was unclear whether Isaiah was beyond help when Neal found him in the car. His sentencing was adjourned so a suitable address could be found. Parangi plans to appeal her conviction. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gayahau.
It's 5:30. Peter Thiel is an ambassador for New Zealand, powerful, well-connected, a man who can make things happen. That broadly is the government's line as questions are asked about why he was granted citizenship after only 12 days in the country. But as we've covered the story, we've been inundated with correspondence from people who've been here much longer than 12 days, decades longer in some cases, and found citizenship much harder to get. So what exactly did Peter Thiel offer that they didn't, and who can quantify that? We begin where Peter Thiel is also a citizen and where he spends much, much more time, America.
Good evening. I'm Peter Thiel. I build companies and I support people who are building new things, from social networks to rocket ships. I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
July last year, 5 years almost to the day after Peter Thiel became a New Zealand citizen, and he's working the Republican National Convention on behalf of Donald Trump. He was unabashedly American, heartland American.
While it is fitting to talk about who we are, today it's even more important to remember where we came from. For me, that is Cleveland and the bright future it promised. When Donald Trump asks us to make America great again, he's not suggesting a return to the past. He's running to lead us back to that bright future.
No mention at all that after a total of 12 days in New Zealand, he'd become part of another country's future too. 5 years earlier, he'd spoken in glowing terms about his commitment to that New Zealand future. And at a hastily arranged citizenship ceremony in California, he'd become one of us. Roslyn arrived in New Zealand 3 decades earlier.
I arrived in 79, so I've been here 38 years.
Yeah, that's a good while, isn't it?
Yeah, and I really feel a Kiwi, really.
1979, she worked here, paid taxes, lived in Christchurch, but after the earthquakes in 2011, 32 years after she arrived, she went back to Europe to visit family and friends and have an extended break. She felt like a New Zealander though, and when she returned she decided to formalise her 3-decade-long life in this country by becoming a citizen.
The booklet that you get when you get the application says you've got to be at least 1,350 days with New Zealand residents during the 5 years immediately before you make your application, and for at least 240 days with New Zealand residents in each of those 5 years.
In other words, despite having spent 30 years in New Zealand, she'd been out of the country too long in 2012 to qualify for citizenship.
And so in 2012, when we were away, I didn't have the 240 days of being in New Zealand for that time. So that's why I can't qualify now.
The clock started again and she'll be eligible to apply next year, almost 4 decades after she first arrived.
I applied for citizenship in 2003 after having lived in New Zealand since 1973.
That's Greg, an Australian who moved to New Zealand when Peter Thiel was 6. He applied for citizenship 30 years later.
I had a house, a mortgage, dogs, a wife, a daughter. I was an emergency foster care parent for DSW. And
as Kiwi as, but he worked for a New Zealand employer who'd posted him to Fiji. And because he'd been out of the country, citizenship was declined, even though, while in Fiji, he paid tax in NZ. Right, so even when you were in Fiji, you were paying tax in New Zealand, were you?
Because I was employed by a New Zealand humanitarian organisation on secondment.
Nonetheless, rules were rules. He'd been out of New Zealand, and even after 30 years as a Kiwi, citizenship would have to wait. He returned to New Zealand, waited 5 years, then reapplied. And neither Roslyn nor Greg actually minded that until this week. So, when you heard Peter Thiel got citizenship after spending the total of 12 days in New Zealand, what was your reaction?
I was reasonably annoyed, to put it mildly. I actually consider the selling of citizenship to be morally bankrupt. I was really annoyed.
Roslyn felt the same way, but also as someone who moved here, lived here, grew to love this country, and even after the earthquakes, determined New Zealand was her home. She sees citizenship as something meaningful. So what would she say to Peter Thiel?
I would like him to care much more about New Zealand, like we do.
Care, that's one thing, but the government has been less, shall we say, romantic. Peter Thiel may not be here, may not have the dogs, the mortgage, the commitment, but that's not what Peter Thiel's citizenship is about. Here's Nathan Guy yesterday.
He's invested here in Xero. He's a great promoter of New Zealand. He's got incredible connections in the US.
New Zealand too?
He's promoting New Zealand all the time to people in the US. It's a very important market.
So, 12 days in the country isn't material. What he does for the country is. The question is, what is that and who quantifies it? There have been investments in Xero, for example, with a pretty lucrative return. But what else? If Roslyn and Greg had to play it by the book after 30 years and Thiel was excused the book after 12 days, what are the quantified benefits of that? Bill English was in New Plymouth today and our reporter Robin Martin asked him.
Well, look, you'd be best to direct the questions about his investments to him. He's, as I understand it, made a few high-profile investments in companies like Xero and Vend and another one. That was all part of the process of a decision back in 2011 about citizenship, and prior to that, a decision to give him residency back in 2006.
Is he still an active player in the New Zealand venture capital industry?
You would have to check with him about his business operations. I don't have any knowledge of them now.
What is the extent of Mr. Thiel's financial investment in New Zealand, to your knowledge?
I couldn't put a number on that. That would be a matter for him to him to discuss.
But he won't discuss it. Repeated requests for interviews don't even receive a reply. So, Peter Thiel won't discuss the actual value of his citizenship to the country, and the government, who calls him an ambassador, says it doesn't know. Roslyn and Greg, who arrived here in the 70s and have been held to the absolute letter of the citizenship book, look on and wonder, what are we getting from Peter Thiel? And what price is New Zealand citizenship?
I seem to remember years ago that it was Tonga that sold citizenship to Imelda Marcos, wasn't it?
And you're equating this with that?
Well, I feel a man bought his way into this country, or bought his citizenship.
That's how Greg sees it. One final question about Peter Thiel for Bill English. What's he like, this high-profile, high-value ambassador for New Zealand? What does the Prime Minister think of him?
Oh, I'm not sure if I've ever met him. I might have met him in my office once when I was Finance Minister, but I'd have to go back and check exactly.
That's Bill English. We will follow up on whether or not he has met Peter Thiel. The time on Checkpoint is 21 minutes past 5. One of the worst-kept secrets in politics was finally confirmed today. Former Labour MP Shane Jones announced he was climbing into bed with New Zealand First and would be the party's electorate candidate in Whangarei. The move will see him take on incumbent MP National Shane Reti at the election. Mr Jones quit Parliament in 2014 to take up a job as ambassador for the economic development of the Pacific. I spoke to the former Cabinet Minister after his announcement at a Whangarei pub and asked him why he's swapping parties and standing for Parliament again.
There wasn't a day go by since I stepped out of the Labour Party where people up and down the north didn't say to me, Shane, Shane, why did you leave? Shane, Shane. Consider coming back because we haven't seen the best of you and you were reared for a role of public service.
OK, but you had a role of public service. It was in the Labour Party and you left that. Why are you returning to New Zealand First?
Look, my time in Labour, no one can doubt I gave it a good go. I stood to not only be the leader, I held significant portfolios there, but the issues I wanted to push, the philosophies I wanted to bring to the fore, they were not tolerated and they did not resonate with the rest of the caucus. So I accepted that they were on a different journey with a different ideological mix, and rather than turn myself into Archie Bunker, I left, and I think I left on reasonably good terms.
OK, let's look at the associate portfolios you had, because I'm interested. You talk about the ideological mix, treaty negotiations, immigration and trade. Do you have the right ideological mix with New Zealand First on treaty negotiations?
Yeah, well, nothing is static. As you know, I was chairman of the Fisheries Commission, and I think that a number of the treaty negotiations at the moment have become constipated. The Crown officials have a great deal to answer for in respect of the muck-up in the Tai Tohira, and I am very much a doubting Thomas.
OK.
But I'm a doubting Thomas in relation to the water claim, and that's the next big controversial issue.
I just wonder, when New Zealand First says on its website, and I quote, ensure that all policy making is based on need and not on race, and this is on their Māori Affairs page, do you agree with them?
Well, you need to balance what's also in the manifesto and what's also on the policy pages. You will see, for example, in resource management and environmental management, there is an acceptance of a host of references giving status to Māori values in resource management. So you can't just pluck one and hope to look to stigmatise the entirety, John.
OK. When Winston Peters said TPP negotiations must be stopped or it's goodbye sovereignty, did you agree with him?
Well, I'm not entirely sure when that statement was made, but obviously when I was employed as a diplomat, when I was employed as an ambassador, I was involved in the PACER Plus trade negotiation.
And you were a supporter of TPP, weren't you?
Well, I was never actually in the House when the TPP legislation went through.
But personally?
But let's not obscure the fact I chaired Sea Lords, I chaired the Fisheries Commission. You don't succeed in these large export businesses unless you can trade overseas. Now, in fairness to Winston, I know of nowhere where he has sought to close down trade. He has a particular view, and I've grown, quite frankly, close to that view, that trade is something where you're offering a good or a service, and we have many valuable, we have in great abundance such valuable things. But you've got to guard your own national status. You've got to guard your own national values, and quite frankly, I think it's a debate that is overdue, and I hope to play a big role in it.
Shane Reti has a majority of 13,000 votes. It's a whopper of a majority. That is a safe national seat. Can you win it? And if not, what position are you expecting to get on the list?
Well, John, how the system works is people put their hands up and they run for public office. You run in a race to win the race. I'm not ignorant of the current polling data, but do not overlook the fact that David Shearer previously did well in this seat. And the New Zealand First candidate in 1996, Mr. Brian Donnelly, but for 200 or 300 votes, would have won this seat. Whangarei people, when given a better option, when given someone who offers a message and a style of operation that resonates with them, mark my words, they will vote in my direction.
Where are you expecting to be on the list? Have you had this conversation with Winston Peters?
All discussions pertaining to the list, look, that belongs certainly not on your program. And secondly, the only focus of today is putting my hand up and being revealed as the Whangarei candidate. All such matters pertaining to the constitutional ranking in a list discussion, that's the business of the hierarchy of the party.
Absolutely. And where are you expecting to be in the hierarchy of the party? Do you have an expectation that if you become an MP, you will end up as deputy leader?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is you're not talking to Willie Jackson. So you won't trap me into an imbroglio where Labour and Willie Jackson found themselves. I'm here to win Whangarei. Now, as the ranking process unfolds in the hierarchy of the party, that's for other decision makers. There's an expectation that not only will I handsomely harvest the vote of Whangarei, but turn Whangarei and Northland into a bulwark against quite insidious influences that are changing what we take for granted about being New Zealanders.
What do you think has changed most about what we take for granted about being New Zealanders? What are the insidious influences achieving?
Well, number one, I have become deeply worried about the impact of low-skilled, low-waged immigration dressed up as education. I am conscious that Minister Joyce describes. I'm conscious that Mr. Joyce has dressed up international education as a $4.5 billion industry. In actual fact, I feel that our education reputation has been diminished. We're riddled with hamburger courses, and many of the students in the area of these language schools come from one state in India, largely men, and I'm told by the Indian community themselves, they have not come here for education, not that quadrant of international education. They have come here for residency. At the same time, we have hundreds of thousands of our Pacific Island neighbours who can never get into the country other than through the RNZ scheme. So I'm most concerned as to how international education has been blighted. I think the New Zealand Qualifications Authority have been asleep at the wheel. I think international education, the cheerleaders, they've been asleep at the wheel. We have gone for volume and we've compromised value.
Where do you see New Zealand First going in terms of its most natural coalition partner after the election? If New Zealand First is in the position of being kingmaker, do you see them as most likely to go with National or with Labour? It's
preposterous, really, to talk about who will be the government without knowing how people have voted. When New Zealand First enjoys a greater level of support that the pollsters are currently owning up to, you will find that whoever we're dealing with, there will be a demonstrable change in terms of future government direction. So it's just unwise. And, it's quite silly. I'm not going to make the mistake, for example, of my old mates in Labour signing up to an MOU with the Greens, where, in my view, the Greens have eaten Labour's lunch and Labour have allowed themselves to be hollowed out by an ill-conceived MOU.
Just before you go, David Seymour's put out a media statement today saying, quote, Shane Jones spent $128K on travel and entertainment in 1 year. And this is playing, I think, to a perceived sense of you having vulnerabilities around the expenditure of public money.
Well, when you're a diplomat and you're as busy as I was, you're in the travel business. New Zealand is an awful long way from the destinations that we need to remain in contact with. It is an inescapable fact, mate, that when you're travelling and you are hosting visitors, heads of state, it costs money. Now, the ACT Party, I expect them to try these petty little tricks, but the reality is that people in Whangarei are more interested in what I'm going to do for them in the future. And anything that is on my credit card is totally discoverable. Indeed, you and I had a discussion about 7 or 8 years ago about this vexed topic, but it kind of makes me feel like Tāna Umanga. They still talk about him and his spear tackle. They're still talking about me and my credit card.
Shane Jones, who is indeed, as everyone knew, even undiscovered tribes on remote planets, standing for New Zealand First in Whangarei come the election in September. 29 minutes to 6, coming up on Checkpoint, All Blacks captain Kieran Reid says the Lions tour has been such a success, he's no doubt they'll return in 12 years' time. That's contrary to what Stephen Jones is saying. Donald Trump's tweets land him in hot water again. How much you pay to park on the street at the weekends? New Plymouth locals want Saturdays to remain free. Sharon has the weekend business, but before all of that, Anna Thomas with the headlines.
The former Labour Cabinet Minister Shane Jones has confirmed he will stand for New Zealand First in Whangarei. Mr Jones was announced as the party's candidate for the September elections at a pub function in Whangarei this afternoon. New Zealand First leader Winston Peters told the crowd Shane Jones was a farm boy who made the most of education to become a Harvard graduate and national leader. He said Whangarei needed someone in Parliament who could hit the ground running and address the electorate's neglected asset base. A judge says the death of an 8-month-old in a hot car while his parents smoked drugs was entirely preventable. Isaiah Neil's grandmother Donna Parangi and mother Lacey Tefetu were sentenced to 3 years jail today at the Rotorua High Court. Justice Lang adjourned the sentencing of his father Christopher Neil. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says he doesn't know the extent of the US billionaire Peter Thiel's investment in New Zealand or if he even remains an active investor. Internal Affairs was yesterday forced to reveal Mr Thiel had spent a total of just 12 days in the country before being granted citizenship in 2011. The Waitangi Tribunal has found the Crown's actions rendered the Horowhenua iwi Mopoko landless. The Tribunal says the Crown purchased the Levin Township site in a way that was significantly unfair to Mopoko, and significant treaty breaches in the 1890s deprived them of their lands. It also says Crown actions contributed to the pollution of Lake Horowhenua and the Hawke's stream. People in emergency housing in Auckland are having to make way for Lions tour fans. The Ministry of Social Development says it's had to move a small number of people who were staying in motels or hotels as emergency accommodation because of the tour. And that's the news.
Thank you so much, Anna. Let's turn to business news now with Sharon Brett Kelly, who in the past 2 or 3 weeks has produced Checkpoint, presented Checkpoint, reported for Checkpoint and done business news for Checkpoint.
I know, I'm exhausted too, John.
Well, yeah, well, we're impressed. Worker confidence at an 8-year high. We're getting lots of reports at the moment, aren't we?
I know, and I guess this kind of follows on from that report that came out yesterday about business outlook, very, very positive. But yes, the 8-year high, workers feeling good about better job security, more jobs out there. But they don't have high hopes about getting a decent pay rise in the next 12 months. And this is according to the Westpac McDermott Miller Employment Confidence Index. It's risen 3.5 points to 113.4 in the last 3 months, or in the 3 months ended June, after falling in the previous quarter. Now, a reading over 100 means that the optimists outnumber the pessimists. So it's a very good figure, and behind it all is the strong labour market and the robust economy. So the highest figure actually since 2008. People earning more than $70,000 in that so-called golden triangle of Auckland, Hamilton and Tauranga, or the Bay of Plenty, are the most confident. But people aren't so upbeat about their earnings, as I just mentioned. And I asked the acting chief economist at Westpac, Michael Gordon, about that, and he said, well, that inflation was starting to creep up and the cost of living will become a factor in wage negotiations. But right now, he says, there's not a lot of what he calls red flags. And by that, he means that it's not the kind of thing that's going to prompt the Reserve Bank to raise interest rates anytime soon. So basically, it means that wages aren't likely to go up by a huge amount in the next 12 months.
Which will be no consolation for lots and lots of people who have had very tiny wage increases over recent years, right?
Yeah, and those households who earn less than $50,000, apparently they are the least hopeful about their wages.
And you can understand that, particularly if they're living in one of the major cities.
Exactly, yeah.
The High Court has fined a former investment manager. I didn't know about this. Who's this?
Yeah, no, you did. Giles Beckford talked to you about it earlier this year in March, I believe. This is Mark Warminger. He had worked for Milford Asset Management.
I remember, yes.
Yeah, quite a very high-profile case, actually.
Yep.
Today, he's been ordered to pay $400,000 for 2 counts of manipulating share market prices, and this was in 2014. The Financial Markets Authority brought the civil case, and it alleged 10 breaches of securities law. The court upheld 2 of those in March. The authority at the time said Mr. Warminger undermined the integrity of the financial markets and public confidence by deliberately misleading trading behaviour. The judge said there was deliberate conduct by a very experienced market trader to take advantage of other parties, and but he did reduce the original $500,000 penalty by $100,000 because of Mr. Warminger's health and personal issues, and Mr. Warminger is actually appealing that original judgment.
Thanks, Sharon. What happened on the Friday markets?
The top 50 index is down 74 points to 7611. The dollar at 73 US cents, 95 Australian and 56 British pence.
Sharon Brick-Kelly, who's been doing business for us this week. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, Sharon.
Thanks, John.
Speaking of weekends, it's rugby night tomorrow night. All Blacks captain Kieran Reid has responded to suggestions this could be the last British and Irish Lions rugby tour, saying it's been so successful he has no doubt they'll come back. British rugby writer Stephen Jones says the tour has been intense, with too little preparation time for the team from the north. Remember, they are coming off their Six Nations season 2, so they are buggered. He predicts they won't return in 2029. But this afternoon's captain run, Kieran Reid had other ideas. At the stadium where the Hurricanes drew with the Lions on Tuesday and beat the South African team of the same name to win the Super Rugby trophy last year. Rugby reporter Joe Porter braved the turning weather, which is expected to have some impact on the game tomorrow night.
Yeah, well, it will certainly play into the hands of the Lions. They'll be praying for the heavens to open here in Wellington, and that's what it is forecast to do. It'll tighten up the match, it'll stop the All Blacks from playing the expansive game they want to employ, and it just turns things into much more of a grudge match, a forward-orientated battle, and the Lions do want to drag the All Blacks into that this weekend. So it will play into the tourists' favour. However, the All Blacks, it won't affect the way they play the game. They'll still go out there to try and score tries and try and win. So it should still be a very entertaining match regardless of the weather. And boy, oh boy, there's a hell of a lot on the line.
Yeah, there is. And having seen the Hurricanes beating the Lions in the most appalling conditions at that stadium last year, these men can play good rugby in bad weather. Let's talk about the Lions. This is absolutely do or die for them. It is a 3-match series. They are 1-0 down. They have to. What do they have to do, and how are the All Blacks going to respond?
Yeah, well, that's right. Like you say, do or die. They lose this and the series is gone, and the dissection starts. How have the Lions been so bad? They win this and it goes to a series decider at Eden Park next week, and everyone gets super excited. So it's an incredible pressure on the Lions. They have to win this game. So much pressure on Warren Gatland. They won't change their game plan too much. What they're going to do is do what they did last week, but try and do it a whole lot better. Try and be a whole lot more physical. Try and outmuscle the All Blacks instead of getting bullied like they did last week. So what the All Blacks can expect is a massive rise in intensity, a massive lift in the Lions' performance, and I asked Captain Kieran Reid just how the All Blacks would deal with that.
Mate, it is rugby, so we'll go out there and play the game.
Look, we go out there and we want to bring as much passion and energy as what we do as All Blacks as well. So you'll certainly hopefully see that from us. If we're sitting back and waiting and expecting what the Lions are going to bring, we'll certainly get caught on the hop and we'll be dominated out there. So we can't be doing that. We've just got to go out there and play our game, show our energy, show how much it means to us as All Blacks. So we're looking forward to doing that.
If this were to be the last Lions tour ever, would that be a massive loss in your mind to World Rugby?
I don't think that'll happen, mate. It's just been so exciting, I guess, being around the country the last couple of weeks and seeing the supporters from both sides. It's been awesome, actually. If you're in the pool and stuff, you see in our own hotel, and they're just so passionate about the game, and I'm sure it will continue.
Kieran Reid, Joe, you were uncannily accurate in your predictions last week, bizarrely so. So what are you picking this week? Test 2, All Blacks, Lions, who's going to win it, and roughly what's the score going to be?
Yeah, well, look, 3 days ago when Wellington was full of sun and everyone was feeling energetic after that first test win, I thought the All Blacks would put 20 points on the Lions this weekend. And the second test, they would run away with it. However, with the weather closing in and just the passion and the intensity you can see in these Lions team's eyes, the players, they're fiercely determined to set the wrongs right from last week and to show Warren Gatland, their coach, that they won't be bullied by this All Black forward pack. So I'm predicting a much tighter scoreline, especially if the weather packs in. I still think the All Blacks will prevail. However, I'm thinking it might be something along the lines of 22 points to 16, under 10 points, a much closer match. And boy, oh boy, it's going to be thrilling, because if the Lions lose this, it's all over. It is do or die.
Joe Porter picking a 6-point margin for the All Blacks. That is close. Staying with rugby, provincial rugby players will be tested for concussion before being injured as the national sport tries to tackle the problem of brain injuries. The idea is that it will help officials decide how badly players are concussed if they can compare their normal brain function, which will then be known, with that after a head knock. Emile Donovan reports.
In March, the Rugby Union unveiled a new scheme which allows referees to hand out blue cards when they suspect a player has a concussion. This means there's a mandatory 3-week stand-down period, and the player needs the go-ahead from a GP before they can play another match. So a researcher, Dr. Danielle Salmon, has developed an app in which players take a standard concussion test when they are not concussed. Dr. Salmon says this means doctors have a reference point when they are gauging a player's brain function.
When they go back at that 21 or 23 days to see the doctor to get medical clearance, it gives the doctor really some, like you said, data that they can look at and say, okay, you say you're feeling all right. Well, your memory's not really, so I'm not 100% I'm not comfortable.
More than 500 people have already taken the test, with their information kept on file remotely. Dr. Salmon says the Blue Card initiative takes power away from the player, which, ironically, is a good thing.
If you're in the finals of the game, you take a big hit, it's halfway through the game, and you get up seeing stars, or you get up a little bit dizzy, you're not going to want to come out. That's where the Blue Card plays a massive role, because that takes that decision-making away from the player. It's an important step, because we know from the research that most players don't report symptoms of concussion because they want to keep playing.
The scheme will be rolled out in all the provincial unions for this year's Mitre 10 Cup, and is also being adopted by some heartland teams and secondary school unions. New Zealand Rugby's medical chief, Dr. Ian Murphy, says it's a strong response to a widespread problem.
The referee is ultimately responsible for player health and welfare on the field, and we were aware of stories of players perhaps staying on the field because the player wanted to and the coach had a vested interest also. Frankly, they'd return 10 minutes later if they had the chance.
But while these initiatives are in place, there's recognition that ultimately concussion can't be eradicated from the game, and so knowledge of your own body is paramount. All Black fullback Ben Smith has already ruled himself out of Saturday's test against the Lions because of a head knock last weekend, a decision his replacement, Israel Dagg, applauds.
Mate, I said to him, you've only got one brain, and it's pretty simple. At the end of the day, we've got to make good decisions, and obviously it's a big test, big series, the All Blacks, but at the end of the day, he's got 2 little kids, a beautiful wife, and you just got to make the decisions, and the whole team's behind him. Yeah, it's only rugby at the end of the day.
Danielle Salmon agrees that athletes need to put their own well-being above the demands of what is, after all, only a game. There are around 8 million reported concussions worldwide every year, and about half of them are sustained in contact sport. For Checkpoint, Core Emile Donovan, Tene.
Coming up to 5:45, the US President has ignited another media storm with an outspoken Twitter attack on a prominent female journalist. In a tweet, Donald Trump labelled the MSNBC breakfast host low IQ crazy Mika in response to disparaging remarks she made about his presidency. He also referred to seeing her bleeding badly from a facelift during a visit to his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. Senior Republicans have reacted angrily through the day, saying the comments are beneath the office of the president. CNN's Jim Acosta reports.
Just as President Trump is touting his administration's energy policy, he's fueling mounting bipartisan criticism that he lacks the temperament for the Oval Office. The latest evidence, a pair of offensive tweets aimed at MSNBC host Mika Brzezinski. I heard poorly rated Morning Joe speaks badly of me. Don't watch anymore, the president tweeted. Then how come low IQ crazy Mika, along with Psycho Joe, came to Mar-a-Lago 3 nights in a row around New Year's Eve and insisted on joining me? She was bleeding badly from a facelift. I said no. Brzezinski hit back at the president with a tweet mocking the size of the president's hands. Asked to respond, the White House said the president has no regrets.
I don't think that it's a surprise to anybody that he fights fire with fire.
Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders defended the president's tweets as a justified response to attacks from the media.
It's kind of like we're living in the twilight zone. They do this day after day after day, and then the president responds and defends himself, and everybody is appalled and blown away. And I think that the president has been attacked mercilessly on personal accounts by members on that program. And I think he's been very clear that when he gets attacked, he's going to hit back.
The president's behavior, Sanders argued, is not beneath the dignity of his office.
I think that he shows that every day in the decisions that he's making, the focus and the priorities. The only person that I see a war on is this president and everybody that works for him.
Still, a slew of top Republicans quickly criticized the president's tweets. Senator Lindsey Graham, Mr. President, your tweet was beneath the office and represents what is wrong with American politics, not the greatness of America. And House Speaker Paul Ryan.
Obviously, I don't see that as an appropriate comment.
An NPR PBS poll found just 21% of Americans found the president's Twitter use effective and informative, while 69% said it's reckless and distracting. But the president's critics say this is also about his attitudes toward women, to his questionable treatment of a female reporter from Ireland in the Oval Office just this week.
And where are you from? Go ahead, come here. Where are you from? We have all of this beautiful Irish press. Where are you from?
I'm from RTE News. The Taoiseach will know me. Oh, Katrina Perry here.
Katrina Perry. She has a nice smile on her face, so I bet she treats you well.
When it comes to the White House message, the president was again his own worst enemy, stepping all over his administration's announcements of new sanctions against a bank in China, a measure aimed at pressuring North Korea, as well as Mr. Trump's upcoming meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin next week. For the president, it seems there are rarely, ever, any apologies.
CNN's Jim Acosta with that report. The investigation and charging of Cardinal George Pell has made headlines around the world. His standing at the Vatican made that inevitable, but the scrutiny of his career in Australia is more intimate, based on his community leadership as a priest, auxiliary bishop, archbishop and cardinal. Critics have questioned his handling of complaints about other clergy over decades of church service. Defenders across the Tasman call him a victim of a smear. At a church service in Melbourne last night, young Catholics were responding to the news of Cardinal Pell's charges. The ABC's Claire Slattery spoke to some of them.
As far as cathedrals go, Melbourne's St Patrick's is about as majestic as those you'd find in Europe or anywhere in the world. It was in this 19th century Gothic-style temple that George Pell was based when he was the Archbishop of Melbourne. But most of those attending church tonight are too young to remember that time.
What was that, 96 to 01? I was like 10 when he moved to Sydney. So, I mean, I had been to Mass here, I think, a few times when he was Archbishop, but I was pretty young, so I don't really remember much.
Ron, 25, is an admin worker who was born and raised a Catholic in a suburban Melbourne parish. Tonight he'll be an altar server during the Holy Hour, a weekly prayer service attended by mostly under 30-year-olds who stay for the youth hangout afterwards.
Well, I think it'll be good that he can finally actually have his day in court and defend all the charges against him. I guess it's going to be really hard since all the media seems to be against him. I think he said there's been leaks.
Let us pray to the Lord.
The 60-odd people attending tonight's service barely make a dent in the vastness of Australia's largest church, and they're as multicultural as those on the Melbourne city streets outside. The priest, Father Shabin, is originally from India. He calls for the congregation to pray for church leaders and the faithful community across the world. It's that faithful community that has provided Sean, a 31-year-old Malaysian university student, a sense of belonging during his 5 months in Melbourne. He's seen the latest headlines about George Pell.
I guess it's good that he's standing up and wanting to clear his name on all charges.
But it does nothing to waver his faith.
Church is an establishment. For me, whatever happens is between me and God. Church politics is church politics, and yeah, it doesn't govern how I feel about the church.
But Sean's sentiment is no longer shared by many Australians if the latest figures from the Bureau of Statistics are anything to go by. Census data released this week shows that Australians with no religion overtook Catholics for the first time. A former priest, Paul Collins, believes evidence heard during the Royal Commission into institutional child sex abuse has turned Catholics away from the church.
The Catholic Church over the last 5 years has lost 2.7% of its membership. When one looks more carefully at those figures, you see that most of these people are in their 20s and 30s. So in other words, we are losing young people hand over fist.
Former Catholic priest Paul Collins ending that report from the ABC. These days it can feel as if almost everything is crowdfunded, and on Give a Little, more than $50,000 is donated every day. Well, now we can firmly add cleaning up rivers to the crowdfunding list. Born out of a realisation that the government wasn't doing everything it could, the Million Metres project plants native trees and native plants on the edges of catchments and waterways. They then essentially act as filters, stopping sediment getting into rivers, which over time helps clean them up. Zach Fleming and our cameraman Bradley White went along to the planting. And if you're watching online or on Sky Channel 83, Freeview Channel 50, the pictures in this story are stunning.
The Hotio River, like so many of our waterways, was once clean, pristine. Nearly 20 kilometres long, it snakes from Welsford all the way west to the Kaipara Harbour. And today it's among the worst for clarity and phosphorus, and in the bottom half for E. coli and nitrogen, largely because of sediment coming off farms. Cue the Million Metres project.
This is one of the key things that we can do to make a difference right now.
Georgina Hart, the project's head of water restoration, joined 14 others yesterday, mostly volunteers, to plant the edges of the Hotio's uppermost catchment at Te Arai, which is on the east coast, right on the border of Auckland and Northland.
All the water that rains onto the land here flows into little streams that flow into the Hotio River. The Hotio River flows down into the southern Kaipara. So one of the main environmental issues with the water quality in the Hotio River is sediment. And one of the key things that planting trees and shrubs along the edge of a waterway does is stop the sediment or the soil getting off the land into the water.
And it's charity, grassroots work. The funding's almost entirely private, except a $60,000 a year grant from the Department of Conservation. But that grant doesn't go far. The 1 kilometre that was planted yesterday...
That was about $40,000.
So it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. Yeah.
Projects are in place from Northland all the way down to Wanaka. And planting this catchment doesn't just make the rivers downstream more swimmable. The Kaipara Harbour is also one of the North Island's key snapper breeding grounds. But it's complex because most of the work the Million Metres team does needs a farmer's blessing. Most catchments, around 95% for the Hotio River, are on private land. Today, that farmer's John Taylor.
We've owned this for 50 years, since 1967.
And back then, he was told to uproot his trees.
The first probably 5 years we spent every winter with an axe and a slasher cutting it all down.
Why?
Well, that was the idea in those days.
John says that bad advice, which was given to many farmers around New Zealand in the 60s, is a massive part of why so many rivers are dirty today. And it's advice that's proved to be expensive.
We've put around about 100,000 of our own money in.
Expensive but worthwhile.
I mean, I'd go down the bottom there and drink the water. It wouldn't worry me. It's because it's clean, apart from after a flood event or something when it gets, violently churned up.
And you believe that's the direct result of what's happening here, planting in the river?
Yeah, we're keeping stock out of the watercourses. And Anybody that knows, stock walk down, they push it in, then it gets washed out, and it's that sediment that is a big thing.
If Georgina and John are the brains, people like Freddie Carr are the brawn.
I think it's all connected, so you do one thing to help something and it's, helping the whole ecosystem.
She drove nearly 5 hours from Ohope Beach to volunteer. 3 others were there on corporate responsibility. Rental car company Juicy backed the project. Other companies back projects too. The Body Shop is a major sponsor. In the 2.5 years it's been running, Million Metres has planted more than 75,000 plants and trees, which may sound like a lot, but actually is just 20 kilometres.
What we're seeing is that the scale of riparian planting that's needed around the country is so huge.
Only 980,000 kilometres to go. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
And Auckland Council, together with the Forest Bridge Trust, have also been working to reduce sediment going into the Hōteo River. Since 2014, they've spent more than $500,000 in the area, which includes both riparian planting and fencing. New Plymouth businesses and shoppers are up in arms about a plan to reintroduce paid parking in the CBD on Saturdays. A year-long free parking trial comes to an end tomorrow, and people will have to pay $2 an hour for the privilege of parking their cars in town. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter, Robin Martin, has more.
The New Plymouth Council says free parking in the CBD on Saturdays is not worth the $310,000 in foregone revenue. But most retailers and shoppers disagree. The manager of designer clothing store Magazine, Jan McFadyen, says free parking has given the business a boost and she's sad to see it go.
Now I'm in a ladies' clothing shop. Our ladies come in and they want to have a really good look at what's in here. We often have ladies say, oops, I've got to get going because I haven't got enough on my parking. And we found Saturday mornings wonderful. It's certainly increased our turnover on Saturdays.
Ms McFadyen is sceptical that the council will invest the $300,000 in the CBD as promised. Free parking resulted in a 20% increase in the occupancy rate, with 60% of parking spaces filled on a Saturday. And it also increased the length of stay to an average of 1 hour 40 minutes. The co-owner of the Crowded House Bar and Grill, Kerry Simeon, is also not thrilled about the return of paid parking.
Disappointing. I think it's going to stop some people from coming into town, or certainly parking in town in the CBD to do their bits and pieces on a Saturday. I'm lucky I've got a car park out the back, but I'm sure there's a group of people that sort of will save the $2 and park further out of town. We're missing out on them coming in to spend with us.
Not surprisingly, parkers in the city are not that happy either.
It's a bit annoying, to be honest. I always like the luxury of having free parking and think it's a bit unfair.
I think weekends should be free. It should be, yeah. Definitely Sundays, Saturdays should be as well, yep. They get enough money anyway.
Personally, extra payment is always not good.
I think it's a bit sad, and it's really going to stop all of our lovely tourists coming in.
I think it's a great pity that paying for the parking, because it's a charge on shopping, and it's a reflected disadvantage to the shopkeepers.
The councillor driving plans to reinvigorate the New Plymouth CBD is Sean Byzik. Mr Byzik says the council isn't convinced free parking is the best use of the $300,000.
You'll never get everyone happy, and no one wants to pay, but at the end of the day is we need to ensure that we're getting the best bang for our buck, and free parking on Saturday wasn't in the unanimous view really of councillors that was the best bang for buck.
Anyone hoping the parking fees will be set against rates can forget it. Mr Byzik has other plans.
No, the rates won't go down by that corresponding amount, because it's not money that's been put back against the rates. It's just moved to we're still spending it. Whereas last year we were spending it on free parking, this year we're spending it on initiatives in the CBD.
Those initiatives include new street furniture, work on the trees in the downtown area, increased cleaning in the CBD and funding for events. In the meantime, shoppers in New Plymouth are reminded they can park for free for 10 minutes at any one of the city's metered parks. In New Plymouth for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
Coming up to 6 o'clock, so much correspondence on the subject of Peter Thiel and his citizenship. This is a representative example. Dear John, I'm so pleased to discover that the majority of New Zealanders you've spoken to feel that Peter Thiel is an unworthy recipient of New Zealand citizenship. I'm among many in our local community, Geraldine, who are trying desperately to support the case for 5-year-old Caitlin Davies and her family to stay in New Zealand. This is such a heartbreaking comparison of right and wrong judgment by supposedly black and white immigration rules. The term exceptional circumstances obviously has very different meaning to some people. Thank you for your feedback.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The New Zealand First candidate Shane Jones says his re-entry to politics is motivated by his concern about low-skilled immigration dressed up as education. The former Labour Cabinet Minister will stand for New Zealand First in Whangarei in the September election. Mr Jones says New Zealand's education reputation has been damaged by a plethora of what he calls hamburger courses. He says most of the people attending these courses are from India and are seeking an easy path to living in New Zealand.
Many of the students in the area of these language schools come from one state in India, largely men, and I'm told by the Indian community themselves, they have not come here for education, not that quadrant of international education. They have come here for residency.
Mr Jones wouldn't be drawn on whether he expected to become a deputy leader of New Zealand First. An American woman working in New Zealand says it's upsetting that the US billionaire Peter Thiel was able to fast-track his citizenship. Internal Affairs was yesterday forced to reveal Mr Thiel had spent just 12 days in the country before being granted citizenship in 2011. Graphic designer Emily Stevens from Washington DC says she's currently on a residency visa working towards permanent residency. She says once she gains that, it will take her 5 years to be eligible for citizenship. Ms Stevens says it's upsetting that Mr Thiel has essentially been able to buy his way to becoming a citizen. She says it's important for would-be citizens to spend time in New Zealand, learn to understand its culture and show dedication to the country. Some Aucklanders in emergency housing are having to give up their beds for Lions Tour fans and move to other accommodation. The Ministry of Social Development says it's working with accommodation providers to make sure everyone has a roof over their heads. One provider, Strive Community Trust, has studio apartments and a converted office space in South Auckland. Its Chief Executive, Sharon Wilson-Davis, says it's had a number of referrals during the tour dates, some from motels.
Given the Lions Tour is in the country, a number of those motels were booked prior. Hence, when they've come to take up that accommodation, of course, that leaves the people with nowhere to go.
Strive Community Trust Chief Executive Sharon Wilson-Davis. The Ministry of Social Development says it's not aware of anyone who's left with nowhere to stay. A researcher for New Zealand Rugby says new techniques aimed at testing players' cognitive abilities before they're concussed will help doctors decide on their well-being. The scheme will complement a new blue card which will be given to referees in the provincial competition this year and can be used to send off a player they suspect has concussion, after which they observe a three-week stand-down period. Players can take a standard concussion test before they're concussed through an app, and doctors can use the answers as a benchmark players should reach before they're allowed back. A researcher involved with the project, Danielle Salmon, says the information could be vital for doctors. Cladding fitted to Grenfell Tower during its refurbishment was reportedly changed to a cheaper version. Documents show the aluminium cladding was less fire resistant than zinc, thereby saving nearly $600,000. The cladding, fitted as part of the refurbishment of the West London Tower, is thought to have contributed to the fire that killed at least 80 people. The BBC's Tom Simons reports.
The £10 million refurbishment of Grenfell Tower included new cladding to insulate the ageing building and improve its appearance. Residents were told it would be made of zinc. But documents from 2014 setting out a list of savings requested in various aspects of the project show the zinc cladding was replaced with aluminium panels instead. While there's no suggestion a deliberate decision was made to reduce fire safety, a source close to one of the many companies involved in the project said the change was typical of the constant pressure by councils to reduce the costs of building refurbishments.
Tom Simons in London. It's 6:04. The All Blacks captain Kieran Reid says poor weather won't force his side to go into their shells in the second test against the British and Irish in Wellington tomorrow night. It's forecast to be wet and windy, which should favour the tourists who'll try to slow the game down. But Reid concedes the weather could curb some of the All Blacks' freedom.
The weather is out of our control, but certainly it's going to be a bit windier and wetter than last week. So I think, you can't just expect to turn up and throw the ball around in those conditions. Really got to earn the right to win territory first, I think, and then from there is put as much pressure as you can on. It's going to be hard, I guess, to make points, but we'll just see what happens.
Kieran Reid. The New Zealand golfer Lydia Ko is 5 shots off the lead in the second major of the year after weather forced the abandonment of the PGA Championship in Illinois late in the first round. Ko shot a 1-under par 70 to be tied for 23rd. The New Zealand women's hockey team will play the Netherlands in the last 4 of the World League semi-final in Brussels after beating Italy 2-0 in their quarter-final. And Ivan Lendl, the coach of world tennis #1 Andy Murray, is confident injury won't prevent the Scotsman from defending his Wimbledon title next week. Murray has twice pulled out of matches at an exhibition tournament in London this week because of a hip problem, but Lendl says Murray will play in the 3rd Grand Slam of the year. And Germany will play Chile in the final of football's Confederations Cup after beating Mexico 4-1 in their semi-final in Russia. And that's the news.
Tomorrow morning, evolutionary biologist and ancient DNA expert Professor Tom Gilbert on which came first, the chicken or the egg. The man who worked out the planetary boundaries framework. He's a Swedish scientist who's been named this year's Hillary laureate. Only 5 boundaries are still unbreached, by the way. And David Tua's Life After Boxing. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 o'clock here on RNZ National.
And now the Met Service short forecast until midnight tomorrow. Gisborne and northern Hawke's Bay, high cloud increasing, scattered rain tomorrow evening. Remaining North Island areas fine apart from areas of fog or the odd shower. Rain spreading from the west tomorrow with possible heavy falls from Taranaki northwards in the evening. For Buller, Westland and Fiordland, rain easing to showers about Fiordland and elsewhere later tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, showers turning to rain this evening with heavy falls from tomorrow afternoon. For Canterbury, rain and showers further east, clearing late tomorrow. Otago and Southland, scattered rain clearing this evening, fine apart from areas of fog or low cloud tomorrow morning. Then rain or drizzle spreading southwards again from the afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with occasional showers developing. RNZ National, it's at 6:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Thomas. Have you got a nice weekend lined up?
Oh, yes. I will watch a bit of the All Blacks, I think.
Yeah.
Just a bit.
Go the OBs. Thanks, Anna. It's been lovely having you with us. And you're back next week, aren't you?
I am indeed.
Shane Jones, former Labour MP and Minister, this afternoon did the not-so-big reveal. As expected, he's going to contest the Whangarei seat for New Zealand First in the election. He was quick to remind the true blue, strongly rural electorate that returns a national MP year after year that he's a country boy at heart. Lois Williams went along to the reinvention of Mr Jones at a Whangarei pub.
The song goes like this. The whole town's talking about the Jones boy. Come on, give us a decent clip.
With an intro from Winston Peters and a friendly audience, Shane Jones launched his campaign to take Whangarei for New Zealand First in September.
There's no point being back in politics, folks, unless you're going to make a meaningful, widespread difference. And politics needs fearless leaders, navigators, paddlers and supporters like yourself. So please back me.
The message was pure New Zealand First. According to Winston Peters, the government's still sucking resources out of the regions and putting little back, meanwhile flogging off chunks of the country to rich foreigners.
We learned overnight that money can buy citizenship, whether one intends to live in New Zealand or not. Where you can claim to be an investor, put in $7 million into a joint government fund, and when you pull your money, you make $23 million, the government makes nothing, and you don't pay any tax, but you're meant to be a great investor for our country. How does this work?
In such times, Mr Peters says that Whangarei needs an experienced man in Wellington.
This is no time to be looking around at novices or an MP with training wheels on. This is no time to be putting up an MP that takes 3 years to find out where the parliamentary toilets are. We want someone who will hit the ground running, knows the system inside out, knows that we have to concertina in a short time, the delay and neglect of a long time, and get some real milestones of achievement. We want just 3 years to prove we can do what they could never do. You give us those 3 years and we'll never let you down.
And according to Shane Jones, his rural roots in the far north make him the right candidate for Whangarei.
My dad was a farmer. My grandfather was a farmer. I grew up knowing where the wealth comes from. The wealth does not come from starting dodgy language schools, ruining the reputation of New Zealand as a place of high esteem in terms of international education. That is a recent phenomenon, and if I have anything of any influence to offer after the election, we'll see an end to all that dodgy activity.
Another former Labour Minister, Davis Samuels, was at the launch to support Mr Jones, and he's hoping to see the country boy back in the House.
I've watched the debate in the Parliament, and for a while there I thought I was at a mortuary. And hopefully, with Shane and Winston together, it'll wake the bloody place up. I think that's what it needs, a real kick up the backside, so that Parliament will be an interesting bloody place once again.
And the Winston Peters Shane Jones Roadshow kicks off tomorrow in the far north, picking up other New Zealand First MPs on the way for a 15-day bus tour of the country. In Whangarei for Checkpoint, Lois Williams.
Now, don't go away yet, Lois, because folk in Whangarei are keen on Shane. It's just not necessarily that Shane. So Lois asks locals what they think.
I like Shane, yeah. I always thought he was with the wrong party when he was with Labour.
Why is that?
He just doesn't seem a Labour person to me. It's probably a soft, mouldy heart, eh? No, I think he did go well. New Zealand First have got some common sense policies. I like their policy on immigration, or their stand on immigration. I like their firearms policy, which is basically hands off. Don't target the legal firearm owners, target the criminals. In fact, hammer the criminals. No, I think he'd do well.
I liked him. He did come to my house. Yeah, I liked him. Yeah.
Shane Jones did?
No, the other one, Shane.
Oh, Retty.
Yeah.
Yes. No, this is Shane Jones.
Shane Jones.
Yeah.
I don't know him. No.
Not really my thing. I don't really, I'm not bothered with, any of that sort of stuff.
Do you vote?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do vote.
But not for Shane Jones?
No.
No.
Why not?
Stick with national things.
I'd vote for New Zealand First.
Why is that?
Winston Peters.
But not necessarily for Shane Jones?
No.
I was going to give my party vote to Seymour Act and Dr. Shane Reddy.
I'd be happy to support Shane Jones because I think he's an old hand. If his policy is to protect the taxi industry.
Well, I probably would vote for him, yes, although I wouldn't have expected him to be going with, what's his name?
First.
Yes,
Winston.
But Winston's putting him up, so I think it'll be most exciting if he got him.
I think he would have stood a better show if he'd stood for Labour. He's a fairly switched-on guy. I think Retty is a sort of an idealist in a sense, anyway. I'd vote for Labour, but I would consider Shane Jones as it approaches, Yeah, I've quite an admiration from him, apart from the films he watches in hotels. I don't think that's really relevant.
Would I vote for him? I don't even know who he is.
Politics is a brutal business, isn't it? Whangarei locals talking to our reporter Lois Williams. It's one of John Key's first big ideas as Prime Minister. The project to build a national cycleway emerged from his Jobs Summit, remember that, in 2009, which aimed to find ways to boost employment and drive regional economic growth. The government so far poured $75 million into building the trails. It's found that for every dollar spent, the trails generated $3.55 for the broader economy. As part of our RNZ's Is This the Brighter Future, an assessment of the National-led government's record, our Deputy Editor, Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell has been taking a look at the cycle trails to see if they've delivered the huge benefits that were promised to the regions. She loaded up her bike and hit the Timber Trail in the central North Island, and Chris met some pretty interesting characters along the way.
The 83-kilometre Timber Trail runs between Puriora and Ōngārui in the Puriora Forest Park west of Lake Taupō. The government contributed $5.5 million to build the trail, which opened 4 years ago. Paul Golding runs the bike hire and shuttle business Epic Cycle Adventures. As we drive to the start of the trail, he tells me he started the business about 3.5 years ago.
And what were you doing before that?
I was a teacher in Auckland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What made you come down here?
I don't like teenagers.
So you saw the Timber Trail opening and saw an opportunity?
It happened almost by chance. We were looking to buy a house in Auckland and obviously, struggling along. And I think my wife got on Trade Me, and I think she, in the search engine, she put the cheapest house in New Zealand. And a house came up in Tamarunui, and we decided to come and have a look at it. It was like $40,000 or something. We thought, we're not going to come live here, but we might buy it and, use it as a holiday place or maybe a retirement place or something. And we came down here for a weekend, and there was an article in the local newspaper about the Timber Trail. It had just started, they just started building it, so it was still early days. And it just planted a seed, and I sort of, it was in the back of my mind. And then almost by chance, must have been 18 months later, I read something on the internet about the trail was about to open. So this would have been 4 years ago, almost to the day. I said to her, let's go back down there, I want to ride this trail. And I rode the trail, and that was it. I knew it was going to be something special.
Paul started off with a van, a trailer and 4 bikes. He now has 3 vans, 40 bikes, and his son and partner have moved to Taumarunui to help run the growing business. Paul Golding says the towns either end of the Timber Trail are doing well out of all the cyclists coming through, and the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment backs that up, saying in its most recent assessment that nationally the trails contributed more than $37 million to the economy in 2015. Most people cycle the Timber Trail in 2 days, overnighting somewhere in the middle, like at Maria and Kerry Tuffin's Blackfern Lodge.
Hi, Kerry.
Hello.
I'm Chris.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Did you know that Maria's volunteered you to do an interview with me?
She volunteered me. She didn't volunteer herself.
No, she's like, oh, Kerry will do it.
Kerry and Maria built Blackfern Lodge 18 years ago to cater to groups and those wanting to stay at a retreat. Business was pretty slow, but Kerry says the Timber Trail has changed that dramatically.
Yeah, this is our 4th season now on the Timber Trail. So that's all we do now is mountain bikers.
And has that been a big change for the business? Like, are you way busier now because you've got the mountain bikers coming through than you were before?
Hugely.
Really?
Yeah, definitely huge. And like for way up here, yeah, it's made a huge difference to this little part of the world.
Kerry and Maria left Auckland in 1987, selling the engineering business, yacht and beach house, to move to the tiny valley in a remote part of the King Country.
We arrived here in the winter and copped 24 frosts in a row, in a tent.
It's pretty rough.
All the locals thought we were mad Aucklanders and we wouldn't last very long and we'd be gone home again. We survived, and if I had my time again, I'd do it again. It was an amazing experience in our life to just live hard out like that in a tent for 14 months in the middle of the winter, and all we did was look after ourselves and go hunting, fishing, and it was just, I'd go there again.
That's
definitely.
Magic. It's magic.
It was brilliant, brilliant part of our life,
Yeah.
So, and then
the second day of the Timber Trail crosses New Zealand's longest cycle trail suspension bridge and passes through the spectacular Ōngārui Spiral. The day ends with a wee spin down the road to the tiny settlement of Ōngārui, which used to be home to the sawmill which processed all the timber coming out of the forest. The mill closed in 1966, followed soon after by the post office. All that remains there now is a handful of houses, the school, which has about 20 pupils, and a small backpackers owned by Rem Renson.
Okay.
So you don't want nothing to drink?
No, I'm all right, unless you're having one.
I'll have a beer.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, I'll have a beer.
Homebrew.
Yeah, shit, yeah, for sure.
Despite sporting a pretty loud patchwork shirt, Rem is a quiet and considered fellow, and after his initial horror at being confronted with a microphone, he relaxes and we settle in for a chat.
Lapping pace going. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Rem has 3 rooms available for rent in what he calls his flash packers. He also offers home-cooked meals and hire bikes. He set up the business 18 months ago after he saw more and more mountain bikers riding past his door.
I had a house there and I was just on my own, so it wasn't no good to me really. What can you do in a house by yourself? And then I'm a builder and I'm 59 this year. Physically, I'm struggling now to do certain like concreting and up on the roof and crawling around, and it's just too manual. I know I'm not going to see 65 doing that type of work, so I've just taken advantage of what's here, really.
Were you living here before?
Yeah.
How long have you been here for?
15 years. I came from Ohura before.
The Flash Packers is just starting to break even, and Rem hopes next year he'll be making a living off the business, but there are some potential bumps in the road ahead. Rem's having a problem with the Department of Conservation, which wants to move the end of the trail from Ongarui back up the trail at Bennett's Road.
They're diverting our potential customers here. For example, they're stopping me from advancing with my cafe here because they're diverting all the people away from the central CBD of Ongarui. And I've been talking to them for 2 years and nothing's been done. And the shuttles, they're running up and down up to Bennett's Road, and then they're coming down here looking for their clients because they don't know where they could be. So it's caused a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
A trust is being set up to help operate the trail, organise volunteers and fundraise. The local councils and DOC say that model will help with community buy-in and avoid the potential for more disagreements about the trail in the future. Atu i te whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
That was a lovely story from Chris Bramwell, despite the beer drinking during it. Goodness gracious me. Motorists wanting to be the first through Auckland's new Waterview Tunnel will have to play a guessing game as the Transport Agency is refusing to say when it will open. After months of delays, the $1.4 billion tunnel is set to open in early July, but although it's been confirmed it won't open tomorrow, the exact opening date remains a secret, unlike Shane Jones. Tom Furley reports.
Aucklanders have already had a chance to walk through the tunnel, with open days attracting tens of thousands of walkers and cyclists. Transport commentator Matt Lowry from the website Greater Auckland says that's unlikely to have satisfied people's curiosity.
I think that shows you that people do want to look at it, and lots of people couldn't get tickets to do that. And so it's quite likely that there will be a lot of people who haven't been through, or even those who haven't walked or cycled through it, who want to see what it's like to drive through. So it's quite likely we'll see a lot of people in the days and weeks that follow this opening going to have a look at it.
But the date of that opening remains an official secret. Earlier this month, the Transport Minister, Simon Bridges, said the tunnel would open to traffic in early July, but the Transport Agency won't be more specific than that. In a written statement, the Transport Agency's Auckland Highway Manager, Brett Glidden, says in the past there have been a large number of people wanting to use new routes.
This created long queues of people waiting on the side of the motorway, which became a safety issue. To reduce the likelihood of this occurring, we will not be announcing the exact opening time.
Waterview resident and local community board member Margie Watson says she won't need to be told.
People in Waterview and Point Chevalier will know the day it opens because all the traffic will be pouring out the northern portal on the very high ramps that are up above residential houses. There's some concern about the level of noise that will drift over both those communities when the ramps open, so we'll see it the day it opens.
She says trying to reduce traffic around the opening is a good idea. However, Matt Lowry says NZTA's decision not to give people warning won't necessarily have the desired effect.
As soon as it's open, that people are going to go and try it out. So yes, it might stop a little bit of the queuing up to have a look at it, that some people might try. As I said, there's going to be some people who want to be the first through, but once it's open, it's going to be open, and it's not going to prevent that from occurring with people going to have a look.
A spokesperson for the Automobile Association, Barney Irvine, says NZTA is being over the top and overly cautious.
we think on balance that the better approach would be to let people know when it's going to happen. You run the risk of causing additional confusion by sort of suddenly surprising people with its availability as a traffic route.
Once the tunnel does open, the Transport Agency expects it to take weeks for traffic flow to adjust to the new route. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
6:24, so much correspondence on Peter Thiel and his citizenship. This is another representative example from people who've had their own experiences trying to become citizens. Judith says, "Hi John, in 1990 I didn't go to my brother's wedding in England because I was so worried about spending time out of the country while my permanent residency application was in. In fact, my now husband and I were so paranoid that immigration wouldn't believe our de facto marriage application that we used to spend our evenings practicing our parents' birth dates, what colour our toothbrushes were and which side of the bed we slept on. We laugh about it now. Did Mr Thiel ever have to worry about this sort of thing? It undermines the privilege to be a New Zealander." And this person says, and this is very strong, but it's a reflection of the correspondence, the emails and the texts we've been getting. Camilla says, "Hi John, this is revolting. Peter Thiel has bought himself citizenship and the national government has yet again valued someone's wealth ahead of all else. Are we really for sale? Well, yes, it would seem so. With national, you can buy law changes if you spend enough on a convention centre. You can buy citizenship, it seems, and by all accounts, you can buy influence. No wonder we've seen the Kiwi battlers battered while the wealthy get richer. Shameful, but I somehow doubt any other lot of politicians would do anything different." Thank you for your feedback. And Sue, just a quick one to end on. Good evening, John. Quite apart from the financial aspect, the Peter Thiel situation begs the question, why do countries allow dual citizenship? If Thiel had to renounce his American citizenship to become a New Zealander, would he have done it? We really appreciate hearing from you all, no matter what your point of view is. Thank you. Finally tonight, just when the Prime Minister Bill English was thinking he had enough of questions about Todd Barclay, tough couple of weeks on that front, and the Peter Thiel situation, along came the students from Mangere Primary School. Now, students from the new Plymouth Primary School turned up to the PM stand-up today with questions of their own. And we thought we'd run them because usually on that rad he's getting a much tougher time. So they began by asking him whether he had a pet.
No, we don't have a pet, and that's because I was brought up on a farm and I like animals to be having a room outside to do whatever it is they want to do. And I've never really been that comfortable about having pets in town.
Have you got that excuse over the line every time with your 6 kids?
Well, at various times there's been campaigns for a dog, and I said, that's great. Well, you have to walk a dog twice a day. You can't leave them because the animal needs the exercise. And I couldn't get anyone to volunteer to do that. All right, next one.
Does he have a big house on the television side? Does he have?
I've had, because I've had 6 children, I've got a reasonable sized house, and we have a small television and only one. I don't think it's a good idea to have a whole lot of TVs in a house because people don't do their chores if there's got TVs in a house.
But one TV explains 6 kids, doesn't it? Right, next one.
What's your favourite program?
On your one small TV, what's your favourite program?
My favourite program?
Parliament TV?
No, I certainly don't watch Parliament in my spare time. One of my favourite programs is Country Calendar. I watch that. And another one is a program called The Middle, which is about a family, and it's quite a realistic kind of program.
That young kid that talks under his breath to himself.
But yeah, they're all a bit different, and it's very funny.
Does he keep fit?
I try to keep fit. I go, because I sit in an office or in a car or in a plane all the time, always sitting down. So when I'm at home, I found that you can keep fit by doing some of the home jobs at home, hanging out the washing and vacuuming the house and so on. And then sometimes I get the chance to go for a run or a walk with my lovely wife.
What's his favourite colour?
My favourite colour is that, there's the Netherlands football team has this really lovely burnt orange colour. And then my other one's blue. I was going to say. Lucky there.
How many friends does he have?
I used to have a lot of friends until I became a politician. So now I have to depend on my relatives, but lucky I've got lots of relatives. In fact, I was going around the business here, shaking hands at the business across the road, and one guy said, "Oh, your big sister's my godmother."
Ah.
Yeah, because she used to live here 20 or 30 years ago.
All right, here we go.
How you get pieces to make robots? Like how to make them?
How do you make a robot, Prime Minister?
Well, I was in a school the other day where the kids were designing these components on their Chrome books and then printing them off a 3D computer, a 3D printer. So kids can make robots now.
Those questions from the kids of Mangere Primary School in New Plymouth. On behalf of our excellent team, Pip Keane, Catherine Woolbridge, Bridget Burke, Michelle Cook, Kelvin Samuel, Zach Theming, Jeremy Veal, Bradley White and me, thank you for being with us. We really appreciate your company. We'll be back Monday at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The New Zealand First candidate Shane Jones is refusing to be drawn on whether he expects to be the party's deputy leader or have a high spot on the party list. The former Labour MP is to stand for New Zealand First in Whangarei at the September election. The Prime Minister says he doesn't know the extent of Peter Thiel's investment in New Zealand or if he even remains an active investor. Some Aucklanders in emergency housing are having to give up their beds for Lions tour fans and move to other accommodation. And a researcher for New Zealand Rugby says new techniques to test players' cognitive abilities before they're concussed will help doctors decide on their well-being. Our next news and weather at 7.
You can leave the fur on the feet, but we want the fur off the body.
Country Life skinning rabbits this week at the Manawahei Bunny Hunt.
Peel it round, get your foot on it and pull the body out.
All pests are welcome.
We have a mouse.